Good morning, and now we can resume the pruning class. Pruning class that has been away for a few weeks. So I know we've done a little bit of pruning, and this week we are going to talk about hedging or hedges. And so here is some of the things that I want to share with you regarding hedges. Hedges are going to be part of a very important part of the garden, and it's going to be part of the architectural design of the garden and also a very linear structures in the garden. This is not topiaries where we saw the video, a man named Pearl, where he was making shapes of it. In a way, it is, but it is not. But this is also not where people are going to be making balls and boxes. Balls and boxes, as the picture that you see on the screen, is a very, very bad way of pruning. It's a very easy way of pruning, where they don't really think about anything that we've done before in the lab, where you have to look at where you're cutting, you have to look at the shape and structure. They just go through here, cut it with a hedge, electrical hedge shears, and they're done. Cut it one side, cut the other sides, and voila. And they create a box. Over time, we can see that this is not the natural form of the plant. And none of these landscapes, the one that's on the screen, was meant to have a box in front of it. So it is unfortunate that a lot of people think that this is a method of pruning. And so they see it in one house and they kind of hire the same gardener, and the same gardener continues on in the next house, and then on and on and on and on. And so then that disperses uh, the bad pruning habits. So here we have two other plants. One is a Podocarpus or Rhamphorcarpus that has made into I guess, a rectangle. And the other one looks like an orange jasmine that has been made into some kind of ball or some other form or way shape. This is not what we want. What we want is a true hedge. It's going to be a linear wall, and this is going to be one of the best ones that I have seen. When we're looking at a hedge or making a linear wall, it is part of the design. So somebody said, when we're building this garden, we are going to have this really nice shape and form in a linear wall that is going to prevent people from walking through the garden or just have a really nice design. What is very, very important that you don't see often is going to be the form of the hedge. When you're looking at the plant and the hedge, you need to make sure that the top portion is going to be narrow than the bottom portion. When you have the narrow top and a broader base, then that allows for light to hit all of the areas, and that is going to give you a nice green hedge from top to bottom. If you notice on this photograph, there are a few areas where it might get a little bit dark, and that's where you have some of those dead spots. So to avoid those dead spots that we've seen, we know that when light does not hit a leaf, it's going to die because it has no function, and that's where you're going to have holes. So make sure that in order for you to have a proper hedge, then you need to have a broader base and a narrow top. And if we look at this photograph, we have a really nice design across and a living wall. And I took this one from above just to show you the bottom that is broader, and you can kind of see as it gets narrowed towards the top. So this would be a very, very nice hedge. So there's a few things to consider when we're doing hedging. First of all, in the design or when you're going to be up for doing a hedge, are you going to do a formal or informal hedge? What we see here, very linear, very straight, very manicured, this is a formal hedge. And certain gardens will definitely lend themselves to that. The informal hedge is what we experience when we cut the Caliandra, the white powder puff that was on the south side of the greenhouse. We created a wall, but it was very informal. We did individual cuts. Some of them were allowed to remain longer, shorter. It wasn't a very, very straight wall. So it depends on the use. So if you want to avoid people from walking through, create a wall, then you can do a formal hedge. If you want to create some kind of screen, a wall to privacy, then you can have something as an informal hedge. Number two, the types of plants. We are going to be shearing this hedges, and we're not going to be looking at the node. We're not going to be looking at where we're cut. We're literally just going to shear the new growth to keep it confined to whatever height and spread we want. So you need to have plants that have very small leaves, such as boxwood, such as myrtle, such as African boxwood, and even sometimes rosemary. And as we'll see later on, people have used different plants to achieve different hedges. But if you want a formal, nice hedge, then you definitely need to have your small leaf plant. The pruning tool for our job is going to be a hedging shear. The hedging shear that it is made strictly for hedges. So there are the electrical ones, but when you definitely want that very nice cut and clean cut, then you need to have a hedging shear as the photograph that we've seen, you see at the bottom. And it was also part of our tools. And how often do you prune? This hedge will have a certain height. Either 1 feet high, 12 inches, 2 feet, 3 feet, that depends on the use. So you want to make sure that when you see growth going out of that specific height, then you prune it immediately. If you allow it to grow, then that's going to shade the lower portion, killing it. And then you're going to have to eventually cut it to the green. And what you're going to end up with is going to be a hedge that's going to get higher, 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 higher. And then you're going to have to do some serious pruning to where you're going to have a lot of dead material because you did not prune in time. And that's what happened with our white powder puff on the north side of the greenhouse, that we just let it go, and we had to expose some of the ugly dead wood or the wood underneath it. The best example for pruning hedges, if you ever go to Disneyland, when it opens again, they are continuously on a weekly basis cutting and pruning their hedges to make them look really nice and extremely manicured. Obviously, this is not a good hedge plant. This is hibiscus, but it has been also made into a ball. And unfortunately, the leaves are way too big. And when you start hedging it, you're gonna have shredded leaves. You're gonna have leaves that are gonna be cut in half, and that's not gonna be pretty. So the smaller leaves, you cut them in half, it is not as noticeable. And so that's how you can get away with small leaves. So do not shear or do not make hibiscus into a ball. However, as we look at the city of Long Beach and some of the other areas that I've encountered, some of the hedges, there's going to be an array of different things. So remember, a hedge is just a wall, whether it be a 12-inch wall, whether it be a 5-foot wall, whether it be taller wall. That is just going to hopefully be there from the design, or in this case, they use an ice plant. An ice plant that is just creating a buffer, just a couple of inches high from the sidewalk onto this yard. And they did the same thing with a ice plant here to create a border on the parkway. Uh, you can shear it, you can do all the same work, and it's doing its job. If we look at this other house, we have Indian hawthorn next to the house, and this happens to be a Japanese style landscape with the rocks and small ground cover. So here, I still don't think it was part of the design, or maybe it was because they have done some really good job in making or shaping some of this. So maybe this is was meant to be linear as it follows the rest of the design. And it was just meant to be about 2 feet high. Be aware that when you are going to be shearing, because you're going to be shearing plants almost every single week or every 2 weeks, you would often not have the opportunity to see the flowers. And it is amazing when people all of a sudden they forget to prune it and they see a lot of pinks and whites, and it's like, I didn't realize it's flower because my gardener has always made it into a ball in a box and never allowed it to flower. So be aware of that. If you have planted something for the flower and if you're going to make it into a hedge, then the flowers are going to go away and you will probably not see them. Here is the boxwood. Here's another home here in Long Beach that has boxwood that is being made into a shape, kind of to mirror the shape of the fountain. So if you notice, when you are going to generate a hedge, you're going to plant the boxwoods that are going to be very close together. So almost 12 inches apart, or maybe 12 and a half, depending on how quickly you want to develop this living wall. So you plant them, you let them get established, then you need to begin their pruning regime that will continue for the rest of their lives. When you then start to cut the top, you are going to encourage the lower growth, the buds that are dormant, and the lower growth is going to grow out. Then it'll begin to fill in some of the gaps in between the plants, and eventually that's how you're going to create the wall. So you would cut the top, and then if the hedge is beginning to get too wide, then that's when you begin the pruning regime on cutting the sides and the rest. So that's how you would create a hedge. And here's in the same house, but towards the front, just to create a buffer, they have a germander small wall here. They also have a Pittosporum. It's a wall, but it's more like a topiary wall with balls. But the top, you can definitely see a border with boxwood that has some of the roses. So it's creating a border for that bed. Again, very linear, and that's the use of this. If we look at going closer to the front, here's where we have the roses, and you can see the same thing on the back. Ideally, we don't want to see this. That's again, bad pruning practices, so they're not doing what they're supposed to, making the top narrow, and so that is exposing all of this dead material. So it needs to be more like this. And the front of the house looks very much like this, very modern. And so it lends itself very nice. So it also has mirrors one side to the other, and it's doing a good job. And just a different view of the house as we keep moving forward, and a few other topiaries on the right side. So now we can see more of what it's intended for the hedges. This is Rancho Los Alamitos. And so you have a boxwood, and the boxwood hedge is about 3 or 4 feet high. So this is just a wall, so it's keeping the people away from going into the rose garden. Yes, it's going to be a little bit of more work to jump the hedge to prune the roses, but that was part of the design, to just guide you through this walkway. And along the walkway, you're going to have a nice green wall on either side. And looking back or looking forward, this is how it looks. They also have a nice informal hedge of cypress, Italian cypress. And these are now a lot higher than the previous one. So this is more like 15 to 20 feet high. But it creates this really nice tunnel where you have the focal point of that bench for you to sit. So larger for privacy, perhaps. And looking back, here is the hedge looking over to the house, or the Bixby house. And here's another view of the hedges there. Here's another residence in Long Beach. So we have a decent hedge here. It's full from top to bottom. We also see some plants that were probably never meant to be boxed, and or some of this arborvitae. Perhaps when they started doing the hedges here, they decided to just create that as an entry point or entryway into the house. And on the side, we have this. So the hedge continues from throughout the perimeter of this property, and it goes in here. So that creates a nice area, perhaps children or animals, dogs, to run around on the lawn. And looking from the top, you don't really see that broader base, and you have some dead spots. Obviously, as time goes by, it is not uncommon for some boxwoods to die out, and it's an act of God that when you work hard many years to achieve this perfect wall, living wall, and then all of a sudden one of them dies in the middle when you were just finished. And so that one has to be given the time to fill in that gap. And then when you fill in the gap, then another one dies. It's an act of God, it'll happen. So just be aware of that. Here's another home in Long Beach with, again, some decent hedges in front. Once again, very linear, and it just blends into with the hardscape or the cemented areas. And that's looking in to this. And from a different view, this is, part of it is going to be our star jasmine right here that has been trained to be a living wall. And here's a slightly bigger hedge to create a screen, kind of hiding an ugly wall or something. And here's another very formal, very Spanish style home, Spanish but modern. So we have, once again, the beginning of some of the boxwood. They've also made carpets out of rosemary. I don't know about that. And there's a very nice linear hedge here between those trees. Two types here. So we have our Indian hawthorn being made into some kind of hedge, and we have our star jasmine once again be made into some kind of hedge. Here we have just two lines. We have the color that acts as a nice colorful portion of the garden. We have a boxwood hedge not a very good one. Notice there's a lot of gaps, and you can see underneath all the stems. And then you have some of the roses in on the back. So it needs a little bit of work, but there's how it looks close up. And depending on where you go in the city, you might see something like this, a shape, or trying to make it into some kind of geometrical shape. Obviously, if you can see with all of the new growth, this is was overdue for pruning a couple of weeks ago. So this is the beginning of it getting taller and taller and taller. And you can see back here where they have already lost a large portion, there's a lot of dead material. A couple of other hedges here. So we have this beautiful one back here. And you have a horsetail wannabe hedge. And I'm saying wannabe hedge because it is unfortunate that horsetail gets cut because people want to keep it into a certain height. And they will shear it and they will make a hedge out of it. Not the best pruning practice. And I can tell because I can also see another very horrible pruning practice, which is the shaping or making balls out of Fortnite lilies. If you were going to prune or make those smaller, you need to remove individual clumps, not just take every single plant and just shear it, creating a ball, and you have the same thing here. At this point in time, if this plant is becoming more of a problem, it is best to remove it, replace it with a smaller one, and let it have its natural shape. So I can see they're trying to mirror this over here, and unfortunately, it is a very different plant, but they are treating it the same. Remember, every single plant is going to have its own method or its own way of pruning. And some of them will lend themselves to well, and some of them will not. So please do not box a horsetail or any of those strap-like long leaves, lilies, or anything like that. Here's another formal portion of it is going to have some topiaries. Here we have a boxwood euonymus. That would be another plant that would be good for making, shaping them into hedges. And then we have our normal hedge with boxwood. And then we have our larger hedge here with the Texas privet. So the euonymus, it's about 4 inches from the ground. So that's a very low hedge. Yes, you can do that. And the boxwood is about 1.5 feet. And this topiary boxwood is about 1.5 feet, almost 2 feet. So small area, small yard, modern. You just want to have the nice linear look because again, that's another thing. Some people are going to really like the linear look, and some people are going to be more of the natural look. So that's when the informal hedges may come into play. But if they want a linear, perfect hedge, then they can have it. And here's just some of the close-up of the boxwood euonymus and the hedge behind it. We have a fig. So this is the creeping fig that has been allowed to become an adult. And this is a vine, but it has taken over this wall and is now being made into some kind of hedge or kept as a hedge. This looks like another type of privet, but once again, I want to point out the lower portion of the hedge is narrower than the top, so it's starting to come a little bit top heavy, and you can see it a little bit better from this angle right here. And so we have probably got out of control, and it's not going to end well. And here's another podocarpus or Afrocarpus. This is a view from the street, so you just have a little bit of that privacy. And Informal, I will say informal, leading to probably more of a formal that has been allowed to get a little bit too shaggy. Uh, Jade plant in full flower and creating a wall, and you will not be able to make that into a linear straight wall uh, or a hedge, but it's doing its job. So it's creating that hedge or that living wall. So this would be an informal hedge with our uh, jade plant. Here's another informal hedge. This is a house, a lemon uh, avenue. I think it's Cowhide. No, not Cowhides, but here in Long Beach is alumni of the program. This was the 500 home for the Land to Garden program. She did all the work herself except for the irrigation. But she wanted to have an area for the grandkids to play and just created that area with an informal Little John bottle brush hedge. And then this slopes down into the sidewalk and you have a ground cover of a Cianotis or California lilac. So this Little John is just creating a wall, trying to keep the children from running down from a different angle. It looks like a wall, but it's not straight and perfect. So this is an informal hedge. And this, I think, was like 2 years after this was installed. A couple of other things. So we're starting to see more of the topiaries here and there. So some kind of shape, but the hedge would be right here. And be aware, depending on who's going to be casting the shadow on this hedge. So that's what's happening here. Somebody, the wall maybe casting some shadows, the bad pruning maybe casting some shadows, creating those the holes that are right here that don't look as attractive. Here's some linear hedges. Some of them, most of them informal. I guess this is a very linear person. So there's a linear plant here, there's a linear plant here, a linear plant here, and a linear plant here, and a linear plant here. Kind of like a hedge-like style. So we have our Mexican sage right here. We have roses. We have jasmine. We have a decent looking non-pruned hedge of that four-night lily. And then we have more repeating with our sages back there. So maybe this is what they really like. Here we have an informal hedge, also kind of a safety, so hides the wall. So we have our Cape honeysuckle and our bougainvillea. This is just a cascading ice plant. So we know that bougainvilleas have very sharp prickles, spines, thorns. So nobody's going to try to climb it. And it's just creating a nice solid wall with a little bit of color, just to give the nice greenery to this apartment complex. A few of the houses that are along Orange Boulevard. So we have some roses that have been made into some kind of hedge-like, most likely that flower carpet rose. And then we have some azaleas or azaleas that has also been made into some kind of wall. Obviously not the appropriate plant, but I guess they're making it work here, and it even has some of those flowers. So these are azaleas or azaleas hedges. Now we jump to eastern US. This is New York Botanic Garden. And here in their edible garden, we have a circle that will be made into a wall with letters in the middle. And the circle is made with blueberries. So these are blueberry plants, and this is all the edible garden. So you can eat the lettuce and you can eat the blueberry. So that has been done there. And so here's a different one with the blueberries and the lettuce and a bunch of the other edibles. Here are some of the other conifers. So this is Central Park in New York, and you can see some hedges-like structures here, and then you can also see some walls that could also be considered hedges that give the nice background to this area, and you see some topiaries. But look at a different angle as you go closer to that structure. So that's going to be a wall of a wisteria vine, and then you have an assortment of different steps leading down with some formal and informal type of hedges. Some kind of weird, nice pattern. So this is looks like germander or some kind of marjoram. And you can shape it and make nice patterns. Obviously, this one needs a little bit of pruning so you can see where the normal height of that plant should be, and then you see the sprigs that are, or the shoots that are just growing above that. So this should have been pruned several weeks ago to keep that nice, very nice shape and look. Looks good, but again, this was part of the design. They wanted to make it look like that. And there's my hand taking the photograph. So this is, I think, still Central Park in New York, right there. Could also be, around here you can do this with snow and summer plant. Again, New York, showing you some of the areas, some juniper hedge here, and some other hedges or probably junipers as well. Now we go into New York Botanic Garden. This is their conservatory, and it's lined with a hedge. So they don't want people to be running through the lawn. So this is how they're guiding people to the entrance. This is the entrance, and this is where you have that very, very nice manicure hedge. So this has been one of the better hedges that I've seen. On the side, you see a square. Again, this is probably part of the design. So they planted these trees and they started to shape them very early on. And it's now a very nice mirror of this geometrical shapes of the conservatory. So very nice. So they want you to see this, and they're achieving that by having this beautiful hedge. So this is the photograph that I've shown you before, where probably one of the best hedges that I've seen out there. As you go into more other areas, so there's some hedges here leading to all those hydrangeas. There's also a couple of different shapes that have been achieved. And even in the Rockefeller Rose Garden, you have the beautiful hedge around the circle in one of the main entrances of the Rockefeller Garden, doing its very good job. A little bit closer to us, this is Cal Poly San Luis Obispo, and this is their horticultural area where they've kept a hedge, and even for Cal Poly, I'm not happy that the top is broader than the base, which is supposed to be the opposite. So getting away from with it right now, but it's not going to be there for too long. It's going to keep getting higher, and it's not going to look good. So San Luis Obispo has its own hedges right here and there. Now we jump the country. This is Kew Botanic Garden, or Weasley Botanic Garden, one of those. So these are in England. You see a really nice geometrical shape in the garden, but you see in kind of an informal hedge here, just to block the view. So this is from the top of one of the conservatories. This is lavender. Again, that's just lavender field, but in the back, you see a very nice, very well-kept wall that just separates more of the forest look versus the more of the manicure look. And so that just adds to the shape and the architecture and the look of the garden. Here's another garden, and we have some beautiful boxwood hedge, very short, about 2 feet tall. just to border the rose garden. And you have a little bit taller as you enter some of these areas. So I think this is their cafe in another botanic garden in England, where you sit and drink tea and eat scones. But if we look at just some of the hedges in one of their gardens in this place, we have some examples of a Roman garden with some hedges. We have the medieval garden with some topiaries. And then we have the Tudor garden, which has something that is known as the, I think it's the lock garden. Don't quote me on that because I might be getting it wrong. So here is the Roman garden with just some of the Roman type painting. And then we have some of the hedges here in some of the containers. So here's some of the grapes and Roman. And then there's the other one, the Tudor garden, kind of made into nice shapes, and some of them allowed to become a little bit taller than others. So it's there. Around here in Long Beach, I'm not sure what is happening here. I think there was a tree that died, and now there is some kind of wall stemming out of that. So I'm not sure if it's to try to keep the pedestrians away. So next to it is probably what was happening. So there was a palm tree and that died, and they just did some steps with a boxwood hedge. So I'm not sure, but that's what you find in Long Beach, and there's how it looks. A little more informal, this is going to be photographs from Fullerton Arboretum, and we have informal hedges, 2 plants. We have rosemaries, and we have our germander. So this is a white foliage plant. So it's just creating a wall. This is informal, but you can still shear it from time to time, and it just gives it a little bit more color, and it's not going to be as nice and dense as boxwood, but it's going to do its job right there. And you can see it here from a different angle. Also, now back to Long Beach. This is Rancho Los Cerritos. And Rancho Los Cerritos has achieved a very beautiful informal hedge that is bordering their orchard, historic orchard. And this hedge is strawberry guava. So you can eat the guava, and creates the wall that prevents the people from going through and into the orchard, and you just going through the designated entryways. Looking as you walk to Rancho Los Cerritos. So here is an informal guava hedge, and you can see that's nice, very nice. Closer to our campus, here we have once again privet used as a hedge, and this is from the sidewalk looking into the house. As we're getting close to the end, here is Rome. So here's some of the beautiful gardens in Rome, and you can see it's a little bit of work, but you see a beautiful display of a hedge with some beautiful color. So some pansies and some tulips and other things that are coming up from there. A different view with all the statues and the pottery. So this lends itself well to that. And from top of that mansion, you can see beautiful hedges leading down. And you can also see this really nice shape and patterns that are achieved through hedging. So that's all that I have for you. So this is the first of our webinars on pruning. So please rate your professor, give him a 10. But as part of the lab, I want you to go out. Remember, you have the entire city. You have the entire city where you can now start to see good pruning and bad pruning. So when you're out in the walking around, walking your dog, going out for a walk, I know we're all supposed to be walking at some point or another. Start noticing some of this. Take some pictures. Take some pictures, share them in our discussion tab so that we can see some of the good pruning and some of the bad pruning. So although I wish I can have you prune, physically prune, at this point in time, I think we can evaluate some of the pruning. So I will be giving you some samples, putting some videos of some samples of things that we can do to evaluate the landscape. I can share with you our before and after photographs of previous projects so that you can at least get an idea of what was done. So I will be posting this and I'll be sending it to you guys in the next couple of minutes. Thank you, and we'll continue with the class.